my name is Laura Duncan, and I will be talking today about Chapter 11, Terrestrial Flora and Fauna. So, to begin learning about terrestrial flora and fauna, it is important to first know about ecosystems and biomes. An ecosystem is the totality of interactions between the living organisms in an area, as well as how these living organisms interact with the non-living parts of their environment. These non-living parts can be things like rocks, water, soil, etc. Ecosystems are focused around the transition of energy throughout parts of the ecosystem. For example, in this image you can trace the energy from the sun to the grass to the rabbit to the hawk and back to the ground which grows the grass. Ecosystems are not commonly used by geographers because of the vast sizing of the scale. An ecosystem can be as big as an entire planet or as small as a drop of water, so there's no true way to describe what constitutes an ecosystem. On the other hand, we have biomes, which are a large group of plants and animals with a functional interaction with its environment. They are mostly identified by their dominant vegetation, which makes up the majority of its biomass, or the total weight of plant and animal organisms. There are 10 types of biomes, which we will cover in detail later in the chapter. Between biomes lie ecotomes, which are transition zones of competition in which they intermingle with each other. So first we have terrestrial flora, which are plants that reside in a particular region. Some reasons we are interested in researching flora is that plants are the most significant visual components of a landscape. They are also an indicator of other environmental attributes, such as topography, soil, and animal life. Last is that plants have a prominent influence on human settlement and activities, such as where humans choose to settle or the way they provide humans with valuable resources. Some characteristics of plants relate to their ability to survive or even flourish in harsh conditions. This also depends on how the plants reproduce. Perennials are plants that endure seasonal climatic fluctuations from year to year. Annuals are plants which perish during climatic stress, but leave behind seeds to germinate during the next favorable season. And of course, the most common characteristics in all plants are roots to gather nutrients, stems and branches to transport nutrients, leaves to absorb solar energy, and reproductive organs to reproduce. Here we have some floristic terminology which helps us understand more about plant types. The two major categories of plants are those that reproduce using spores and those that reproduce using seeds. Plants that use spores are divided into two categories, bryophytes and pterophytes. Bryophytes have never been dominant except in local cases and include things like true mosses, peat mosses, and liverworts. Pteridophytes were once dominant but are no longer today. These things include things like tree ferns, giant horsetails, and tall club mosses. Next, there are two categories of plants which reproduce using seeds. Gymnosperms carry their seeds in cones or conifers, such as pine trees. Angiosperms carry their seeds in a protective body, such as a fruit or nut. Other distinctions of plants are based on their stem or trunk composition. Woody plant stems are composed of hard fibers, while herbaceous plants are composed of soft fibers. Whether trees lose their leaves or not also depends on their classification. Evergreen trees shed their leaves sporadically, but always appear to be fully leaved. This would be like a pine tree that is green all year round. Deciduous trees shed their leaves annually, usually in cold or dry seasons. This is like in autumn when many trees are visibly bare. There are two types of leaves that trees may have. Broadleaf trees have leaves that are flat and expansive in shape, while needle-leaf trees have tough, leathery, waxy needles instead of traditional leaves. Hardwood and softwood trees are not hard or soft like one would imagine based on their names. Hardwood trees, rather, are angiosperm trees that are broad-leaved and deciduous, while softwood trees are gymnosperm trees that are needle-leaf evergreens. Environmental adaptations have happened over the years to help plants survive and reproduce. There are two major types of environmental adaptations used by plants. Xerophytic adaptations are structurally adapted to withstand dry conditions. There are 4 types of this adaptation in which different parts of the plant are modified in order to help the plant thrive. Another type of adaptation is hygrophytic adaptation, which is suited to a wet terrestrial environment, in which there are 2 types. Hydrophytes are plants that are more or less permanently submerged in water, while hygrophytes are moisture-loving plants that require frequent soaking, such as ferns. Next, we have competition among plants. Plants are competitive for resources just like humans and animals. However, this does not mean all plants are competitive with each other, considering they all get their energy from the same sun and do not need to compete for this energy. Change is also an important part of plants, since change is inevitable. Plants can reach a stage called climax vegetation, in which even if change is occurring, it is no longer noticeable. The stages leading up to this climax vegetation are known as seral stages. There are some major floristic associations that classify plant associations. The first is forests, that include trees that grow together and form a canopy. They require annual participation in order to flourish. They are likely to become climax vegetation due to the vast amount of vegetation within them. Woodlands are similar to forests, however their trees are spaced farther apart and do not form a canopy. This means that the ground cover can either be dense or sparse depending on other factors. They are also generally drier than forests. Shrublands are dominated by short woody plants called bushes, or shrubs. There are not as many trees or grasses located in these areas as others. They have a wide latitudinal range, but are restricted to semi-arid or arid locales. Grasslands are regions dominated by grasses or forbs. There are 3 prominent types of grassland. The first is the savanna, a low-latitude grassland characterized by its tall grasses. The second is a prairie, categorized by its short grasses. And the third is the steppe, categorized by its short grasses and bunch grasses. Deserts are often barren lands with plants widely scattered throughout. Despite this wide scattering, they do have a great variety of the plants that do grow there. A tundra is like a desert but in a colder climate. It has a complex mix of very low-growing plants. They are often in high altitudes, hence the colder climate. And last, wetlands are covered in standing water either all year or the majority of the year. The vegetation in wetlands rise above this water. The 2 types of wetlands are swamps, with trees as its dominant vegetation, and marshes with grasses as its prominent vegetation. Vertical zonation can cause significant change in vegetation and varying elevations. Different elevations can cause different temperatures and precipitations, which affect what can grow there. The tree line is the elevation above which trees are unable to survive and can be affected by this vertical zonation also. Local variations to environment can also have an effect on the vegetation that can grow there. Exposure to sunlight is one example of this, and can depend on the slope at which the sunlight reaches the plant. An adrette slope is a high-angled slope and causes high and dry areas. An UBAC slope is a low-angled slope, which causes more luxuriant vegetation due to cooler conditions. A valley bottom location can also affect vegetation. Riparian vegetation happens when streams are lined with trees but grow nowhere else in the landscape due to the exposure to the sun. Next, we have terrestrial fauna, or animals which inhabit a particular region. Some characteristics of fauna or animals are that they are of a greater variety than plants, but do not hold as significant of a place in the landscape as plants do. There are hundreds of thousands of species of animals that inhabit the earth. Animals are vastly different than plants because they are motile and can move around from place to place. They also differ because they depend on eating plants or even other animals to survive instead of relying on the sun for energy. There are 2 major categories of animals, invertebrates and vertebrates. Invertebrates do not have a backbone, while vertebrates do. Invertebrates account for more than 90% of all animals, with beetles being notably 1/4 of this statistic. Others include insects, mollusks, starfish, and other animals listed here. Vertebrates do possess a backbone, and this backbone protects their main nerve or their spinal cord. Humans, fish, and reptiles are just a few types of animals shown here who possess this backbone. There are many types of vertebrates in the world. Fish are a type of vertebrate who breathe underwater and inhabit either fresh or salt waters. Some special types of fish can live in both types, such as salmon, who live in fresh water, but live the majority of their lives in the ocean. Amphibians are semi-aquatic animals. This means that they can thrive above water and below water. They are born being fully aquatic, but develop lungs and the ability to breathe as they grow into adults. Reptiles are scaly, land-based animals and mostly consist of lizards and snakes, and lesser populations of turtles and crocodilians. Birds are an animal that live on land but are able to fly. There are over 9,000 species of birds alone. They reproduce by laying eggs, and they are endothermic, meaning that they maintain a constant body temperature despite the temperature around them. Mammals are the last group of vertebrates and cover a wide variety. They are endothermic like birds, but also have hair on their bodies. All mammals produce milk in order to feed their young. However, there are different ways that they give birth. Placentals develop their baby in the mother's body and give birth to live young. These young are protected by an organ known as the placenta that connects to the mother's bloodstream. Marsupials give birth to live young, however they are underdeveloped, and they then stay in a pouch on the mother until they are ready to live on their own. And last, monotremes are unique egg-laying mammals in which there are only two species. These are the echidna and the platypus. Similar to plants, animals depend on environmental adaptations in order to thrive. One type of adaptation are physiological adaptations, in which anatomical or metabolic changes occur. Examples of this would be animals in the cold climates having thick fur or dogs having webbed feet in order to swim better. Another type is behavioral adaptation, in which animals modify their behavior in order to minimize the effects of stress on their environment. Three examples would be migration, in which animals move regions periodically, hibernation, in which they spend the winter in a dormant condition, and estivation, or spending the dry hot period in a torpid state. Animals also adapt in the way they reproduce or the way that they take care of their young in order to thrive. For example, a species may avoid mating in bad weather conditions in order to ensure favorable conditions when they do produce young. Adaptations to desert life is one of the most notable in species. They must adapt to the high stress of the desert due to its harsh and hot climate. Some animals adapted by becoming nomadic and following the rain due to no permanent water sources. Some spend the majority of the time underground since it is cooler than being in the hot sun with no shelter, and some even delay their reproduction of offspring until favorable conditions. Competition among animals is more intense than competition among plants. Many species live in groups, which can be a good thing and increase cooperation for the group to thrive. However, this can also cause groups to compete for the same resources in order to survive. Many species of animal are concerned with their own survival and not that of a group or even of their own young in some cases. There can also be cooperation between species in order to ensure survival of one or both parties. This is called symbiosis when two dissimilar organisms live together. One type of this is mutualism, in which the relationship benefits both parties and causes no harm. Another type is commensalism, in which they live together with no injury to each other but no particular benefit either. And the last type is parasitism, where one organism lives on or in another and causes harm to the host organism. There are zoogeographic regions in which the world is divided that are different than ecosystems or biomes. These are divided by the distribution of terrestrial vertebrates in these areas. The Ethiopian region located in Africa is primarily tropical or subtropical. There is a rich and diverse fauna in this region, more than any of the other regions. There are also the greatest number of mammalian families in this region. The Oriental region is located in Asia and is similar to the Ethiopian region, but is not nearly as diverse. Instead of mammalians dominating, there are many brightly colored birds and venomous snakes throughout the region. The Palearctic region is located in the northern region of Eurasia. Due to its high altitudes, less fauna inhabit this region, and it is very different than the previous two regions. The Nearctic region in North America also has a poor fauna compared to the Ethiopian and Oriental regions. One of the most important notable groups in this region are freshwater fish. These two regions are so similar that zoologists group them into one region called the whole Arctic. These regions were once connected by a land bridge, which explains some reason for such similar fauna. The Neotropical region is located in South America and has a very rich fauna, most notably its bird population, which is very diverse. The Madagascar region is located on the islands to the east of Africa, although it is very different from the Ethiopian region. Its most notable population is its primitive primates such as lemurs. The New Zealand region is located in New Zealand and possesses a unique fauna of mostly birds. A large portion of these birds are flightless, and this differentiates it from the Neotropical region. There are almost no terrestrial vertebrates in this region. The Pacific Island region is located in the Pacific Islands to the west of the Americas and is home to many isolated islands. It has a very limited fauna population due to this isolation. The Australian region is located in Australia and is the most distinctive region of them all. It possesses 9 families of terrestrial vertebrates, and 8 of those families are unique to only this region. Isolation has affected this region's flora and fauna, but has not limited it like the isolation of the Pacific Islands. Another very unique thing about Australia is the fact that 90% of all its trees are eucalyptus trees. Now we circle back to the 10 major biomes in detail. The first is the tropical rainforest, the most complex ecosystem in the world. Many of the plants in this biome are broadleaf evergreen species that do not have a seasonal leaf fall. The trees form a canopy over the undergrowth. However, the canopy is layered, unlike normal forest. Tall trees serve as the first layer of the canopy, followed by shorter palm trees and ferns which are able to grow in the shade. There can be many more layers like this depending on the area. In places such as near rivers where the sunlight is able to reach the undergrowth, jungle-like areas grow. Despite the vast amount of decomposition that occurs in this biome, the soil is surprisingly infertile. Fauna in the rainforest are often tree-dwelling due to the food source growing in the canopy and not on the ground. The tropical deciduous forest is found in the transitional zone between tropical wet and tropical savanna climates. It has a less dense canopy than the rainforest, and the trees here grow much shorter. Most of the trees shed their leaves at the same time during the dry period. This allows sunlight to get through the canopy and produce the classic jungle conditions. There are more ground-level vertebrates since the food grows on the ground rather than in the canopy. The tropical scrub biome is located in the dry regions of the tropical savanna and subtropical steppe climates. It is dominated by low-growing trees and tall bushes, just like those associated with steppe landscapes. The trees can grow closer together, but mostly grow with a considerable amount of space in between. The fauna is composed of mostly ground-dwelling mammals, reptiles, birds, and insects, and is moderately rich but nowhere near that of the rainforest. Despite its name, the tropical savanna region does not completely overlap with the tropical savanna climate. It is dominated by tall grasses and can contain spread-out trees and bushes. Human interaction is to blame for degeneration of vegetation in many areas due to fires set by humans and grazing by animals that humans have placed in these regions. There is a very prominent seasonal weather pattern in these biomes. There is a great variety of fauna in these regions that can vary from continent to continent. The desert biome is closely correlated to the subtropical desert and mid-latitude desert climates. Despite the vast lack of vegetation that can survive here, the vegetation that does survive is quite variable. The fauna is also more diverse than would be anticipated in such a harsh regions. Most animals take shelter underground to stay hidden, contributing to the idea that the deserts do not have many different types of species. Mediterranean woodland and shrub regions experience a dry summer, wet winter precipitation typical of Mediterranean climates. Like its name, it is mostly dominated by woody shrubs which grow together densely. The plant species in this biome can vary from region to region due to differing climates. The summer is mostly rainless in these regions, which cause a great deal of fires. Because of this, many of the plants have adapted to leave their seeds behind for germination after they are destroyed in these fires. In this region, burrowing rodents, birds, and reptiles are common types of fauna. Mid-latitude grassland biomes differ by region. In the northern hemisphere, it is associated with the steep climates, and in the southern hemisphere, there is no particular climate. Lack of precipitation prohibits growth of trees and bushes, but not of grasses. Many of the grasses that grow here are perennials and survive the harsh and dry conditions. The most notable fauna living in the grasslands are large grazing animals. However, human interaction has decreased their population by settlement in these regions. Mid-latitude deciduous forests are forests composed mainly of broadleaf deciduous trees. In the summer, these trees form a canopy due to their dense growth, and it dissipates when they lose their leaves in the drier and colder months. These forests hold the most diversity of all the mid-latitude biomes, but not near that of the tropical regions. There are a variety of birds, mammals, amphibians, and reptiles. The boreal forest biome has a close correlation to the subarctic climate. Most of the trees residing here are conifers. These trees grow tall and dense, but do not form a canopy due to their structure. The frozen subsoil here causes poor drainage in these regions, making bogs numerous and the ground spongy throughout the summer. This frozen soil also hinders food growth, which limits the food supply for potential animal inhabitants. As a result, the diversity is very limited. The majority of the species here are birds and fur-bearing animals, since they are able to survive in these harsh climates. The tundra biome is essentially the cold version of a desert and is located within the tundra climate. There is considerable mixture of plant species here despite its harsher climate. Plants here grow close to the ground and very densely packed. The majority of animals living here are birds and insects during the summer months. Tundras in higher elevated regions are alpine, meaning they are native to the mountains. Finally, we will examine some human modifications of natural distribution patterns. Humans have a vast record of altering habitats due to their careless interaction with them. Humans destroy many ecosystems by removing plants and animals for the process of land development. This can cause species to begin to die out and has even caused extinction in some cases. Animal habitats are altered because of human activities such as farming, engineering, grazing, etc. This can lower the soil quality as well as hurt vegetation growth in the area. Tropical deforestation is the main environmental problem we deal with today and can cause soil erosion, flooding, drought, etc. As of now, more than half of the African rainforest is gone because of deforestation by humans for land development. Artificial translocation of exotic species to new environments can greatly affect ecosystems. It can either cause the species to die out fast because of climatic stress, or to greatly flourish, which can upset the natural balance of the ecosystem and be disastrous for other species. And that is all for Chapter 11.